Good morning, everyone. My name is Mathilde, and today I will be presenting on fractured dialogue and escalation in union negotiations through the specific case study of the Chicago teacher strike in 2019. To provide a little bit of background context, on October 17th, 2019, 25,000 teachers went on strike for 15 days. Why does this matter? This matters because while CPS and the mayor's office were in direct conversation with CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union, the teachers lost a week of pay. The students lost out on really critical moments in their school year. The parents had no childcare. So when I looked into this conflict, first we got a lay of the land to understand how the actors are interacting with the structures and what the dynamics are that they are enforcing or inhibiting. And I'll take us to a very specific place within the conflict where you can see that Chicago Public Schools reports directly into the mayor's office. So they have a direct line of access to the mayor, who is also the decision maker in this conflict. Chicago Teachers Union does not have direct access to the mayor. They have no FaceTime with her. She doesn't join any negotiation until the final day, which means that there is inevitable strain and inhibited trust between the teachers union and the public schools because there's a sentiment that it's not fair. Who's in the middle of this? The teachers and the students. Because while the teachers are also liable to the Chicago Public Schools as their employer, they are responsible to the union as well, and they will be fined if they're not at the picket line the next day. When I collected data, it was important to me to source information that gave me direct voices into the stakeholders' thoughts. So I sourced a lot of my information from op-eds in newspapers, press releases, press conferences, town halls, concurring and dissenting opinions. And as you can see here, they're talking about the same thing, but they have completely different realities as to what that actually looks like in practice, which leads to a pattern of escalation. These theories demonstrate that escalation is a bilateral dynamic. There's a vicious cycle of action and reaction wherein nobody ever sees themselves as the original escalator, but rather someone responding to the escalation. This gives them this disposition of mirror image wherein they see their counterparts as morally deficient and themselves as morally superior, preventing them from wanting to take accountability for any of the escalation that ensues. The serpentine model is a really great model to identify this because it's a sequence of events of action and reaction and demonstrates where specific escalation takes place. And these bifurcation points are opportunities to see where intervention could have intercepted this. We'll look at this very specific example. From October 17th to the 21st, both parties state that negotiations are going well. It isn't until Mayor Lightfoot sends a letter to President Jesse Sharkey asking the teachers to go back to school that all hell breaks loose. This letter goes all across the city of Chicago for everyone to experience. And so CTU immediately hosts a press conference asking for united escalation and deciding to send their bargaining team to the picket line. That means an entire day of bargaining is out the door. Mayor Lightfoot that night publishes a press statement expressing her dissatisfaction with the decision and frustration that they're sending the key members to the picket line because it will interrupt bargaining. Next day, Elizabeth Warren joins the picket line, fueling the flame. Part of the reason that there's a lot of this lack of shared reality is because there is a difference in the power and status of these individuals. Mayor Lightfoot is somebody who has a lot of high power, but as a recently elected official who was not endorsed by the union, she doesn't have status yet in Chicago. And what we see in this theory is that folks who have high power but low status are more likely to produce interpersonal conflict that fuels these spirals and contribute to the demeaning treatment. CTU is in a different boat. They have a lot of manpower that gives them exposure, which gives them status, and they are seen as somebody who is recruiting to bolster their cause. This identifies that Mayor Lightfoot seeking status is looking for a need of respect to be fulfilled, while the union is looking for a little bit more procedural power because Lightfoot has the law on her side as the decision maker. The union is lacking procedural power to give them authority and a voice in the conflict. The purpose statement of this conflict is to explore how trust was impaired due to fragmented communication and understand how this ultimately escalated the conflict further than it needed to. My very first intervention looks at how we can establish authority for the union. The idea is to have all of the core stakeholders in one room to discuss ahead of the negotiation what their shared values will be within the bargaining space, and how they'll co-author norms of engagement once negotiations commence. This looks like who's going to be at the bargaining table, how are they going to communicate to the Chicago public, how will restorative practices go. The idea here is that monitoring and evaluation is embedded within the very first intervention as a means of prompting ownership. A lot of these interventions are meant to establish immediate buy-in because they're voluntary. So this is a means of ensuring that everyone here is a willing participant, facilitated by a character called the guardian. And then Mayor Lightfoot will be in the role of a project sponsor, as this forces her to detach from her role as affiliated to CPS and carry a more neutral perspective. Following the second intervention, restorative practices will then be implemented once negotiations begin as a maintenance strategy. The idea is to maintain the rapport, but to do it in a sense that takes into consideration the escalation that will happen once tensions ramp from the negotiations beginning. The twofold intervention observes part one, a morning circle, 30-minute check-in before bargaining every single day. The purpose is connection over correction. The idea is to establish an aspect of humanity beyond the bargaining room so that they have an understanding of who they are as individuals. And then part two is a peacemaking space, connection with correction. This is rooted in restorative practices work that looks at how individuals can take accountability and express genuine remorse when they've done something disruptive or challenging to the space. The idea is that the guardian will facilitate an open dialogue where, say, one person is impacted by the tone of how they were addressed at the table. That guardian will understand, bring it to the impacting individual who contributed the harm, have a conversation about what type of restitution they're looking for, and then they'll host an entire peacemaking circle to have this conversation. Consensus-based symbolic restitution is really important because it allows for dissimilar thought, which interrupts groupthink in a space where both networks are incredibly centralized. And it also gives them short-term wins that give them some momentum to push forward throughout the negotiation. Before I hit my third intervention, I want to demonstrate the network map. What's really important to visualize here is that the media and the news coverage are right in the middle. They are the single actor that has the most strong ties. And this is because the mayor's office and the public schools with the union are not well connected with one another. They're very centralized networks that are clashing because they're not speaking directly. My third intervention proposes to bring in a third-party facilitator, the guardian, to broker the conversation and to integrate the networks more intentionally. What this looks like a little bit more comprehensively, this person is a multi-partial broker. They are neither neutral nor impartial. They are advocating on behalf of everyone in the space, challenging disruptive behavior tactfully to hold stakeholders accountable to their commitments made, which is to prioritize the needs of the teachers and the students in the classroom. They own the process, none of the content, none of the substantive conversation they participate in. This is important to note because their only vested interest is the success of the collaboration. That's how they will know that they will have accomplished what they were meant to. Naturally, the guardian is a relevant role for this particular conflict, but the goal would be to scale this up horizontally with an understanding of making the community more self-sustaining. One potential option that looks like guardian toolkits, transferable infrastructure that details the guardian's process, working guides that demonstrate how the guardian measured success, what moments they implemented various adaptations to certain initiatives, and then community working groups. These are recurrent spaces where people can address tense conversations in de-escalated environments, and it's a collective outlet for lateral authority so that everybody can have a voice with the intention of integrating the network. So what? Why does this matter? Right back to the beginning. This matters because teachers are the single most important resource in a school, and they're there to support the education of students. And this is an impeccable example of how interpersonal friction and mutual disregard for one another corrupted the entire purpose of the negotiation, ultimately fracturing dynamics and pushing the strike further than it needed to. Integrating ritual-based processes in order to mitigate these fractious dynamics is one potential option in order to navigate high escalation bargaining spaces. Thank you.